some days in Emil's life when he got into mischief, but did a lot of good things too. That wretched cherry wine was one of the things which was remembered in Lonnenberger for a long time, though Emil's mother would have preferred to forget it as quickly as possible. She didn't write anything in the blue exercise book about what happened on that fateful 10th of August. It was so awful that she couldn't bring herself to write about it. But on the 11th of August she made a note, and when you come across it without any warning, it gives you rather a start. Heaven help my poor boy, but at least he was sober today. That is all it says, no more and no less. You are left wondering whatever did happen, and whether it was true about Emil seldom being sober. Emil's mother really should have explained what it was all about, but as I have said, she couldn't bring herself to do so. There is also a note on August 15th where she wrote, "Last night Emil and Alfred went out to catch crayfish. They caught 60 score, but afterwards, oh dear me." 60 score! Have you ever heard anything like it? That's an incredible number of crayfish, I can tell you. Just think about it and you'll realise why Emil enjoyed that night. If you have ever gone fishing for crayfish on some little smarland lake on a dark August night, you will understand why. You will know what fun it is, and how wet you get, and how strange the world is. Oh, it's so dark, and the wood is so black around the lake, and everything is very quiet, and all you can hear is the water splashing against your legs as you wade about near the shore. If you have a torch with you, like Emil and Alfred had, you can see the big black crayfish crawling around between the stones on the bottom of the lake, and you only have to put your hand in and grab hold of their backs one after the other and pop them into a sack. When Emil and Alfred walked slowly home at dawn, they had so many crayfish they could hardly carry them, but Emil whistled and sang as he walked. What a lovely surprise for Papa, he thought. The thing was that Emil liked to show his father what a fine boy he was, but so often it didn't work out that way. He wanted his father to see the mass of crayfish the moment he woke up, so he put them in the big copper cauldron, the one in which he and Ida took their baths on Saturday nights, and then he took it into the bedroom and put it next to his father's bed. What excitement there will be when they all wake up and see my crayfish, thought Emil, and then he crept to bed feeling very tired and went to sleep. All was quiet in the bedroom. The only sounds were little whistling snores from his father and the soft chattering of the crayfish crawling all over each other, as crayfish do. Emil's father got up very early every morning, and so he did this morning. As soon as the wall clock had struck 5, he pulled off the bed covers and slung his legs over the edge of the bed, then sat for a while, until he woke up properly. He stretched and yawned and scratched his head and wriggled his toes. He had once had his left big foot caught in a rat trap that Emil had set, and since then that toe was a bit stiff and needed to be loosened up in the morning, and as Emil's father was sitting there loosening it up, he suddenly gave a bellow that made little Ida and Emil's mother wake up in terror. They thought that Emil's father was being murdered at the very least, but it was only a crayfish which had grabbed him by his big toe, the same toe that had been caught in the rat trap. If you have ever had your big toe in a crayfish's claws, then you'll know it's just about as painful as having it in a rat trap. You just can't help bellowing. Crayfish are stubborn creatures. They hang on for dear life, gripping harder and harder. No wonder that Emil's father screamed, and so did Emil's mother and little Ida after they saw hundreds of crayfish crawling about the floor. Oh yeah, there were ever so much excitement that morning. "Emil!" shrieked Emil's father at the top of his voice, partly because he was angry and partly because he wanted Emil to fetch the pincers so he could pull the crayfish off his toe. But Emil was so sound asleep he couldn't be woken by any amount of excitement. Emil's father had to hop on one leg to the toolbox in the kitchen cupboard and get the pincers himself, and when little Ida saw him hopping across the floor with the crayfish dangling from his big toe, she was very upset, because it was such a pity that Emil was lying asleep and missing it all. "Wake up, Emil," she shouted. "Wake up if you want to see something funny." But she was silent when she saw the look on her father's face. He obviously didn't see anything funny about it at all. Meanwhile, Emil's mother crawled round on the floor picking up crayfish. After 2 hours, she had collected all of them. When Emil finally woke up later in the morning, all he noticed was the delicious smell of freshly cooked crayfish drifting in from the kitchen, and he wriggled with his legs in pleasure. For 3 days they ate crayfish at Cuttelt and delighted in them, and beside that Emil cleaned a mass of crayfish tails and sold them to the parson's wife for 24 ore a pint. He shared the proceeds with Alfred, who was always short of money, and thought Emil quite remarkable to have had the idea. "You're a smart businessman, Emil," he said, and he was right about that. Emil already had 50 kroner in his money box that he had earned at different times. Once he had thought about carrying through a really big deal by agreeing to sell all his little wooden men to Mrs. Petrel, because she loved them so much. Mrs. Petrel also wanted to buy Emil's wooden gun and give it to a horrid little boy she knew, but nothing came of that either. In fact, Emil realised he was getting too old to play with it, but all the same he didn't want to sell it. Instead, he nailed it to the wall of the tool shed and wrote above it in red crayon, "A present from Alfred." Alfred laughed when he saw it, but you could tell that he was really pleased. Emil wore his cap all the time. He couldn't do without it. He even wore it the first day he went to school. Yes, it was time for Emil to start school, and the whole of Lonnenberger held its breath.